I thought I opened my home to save my family. I never imagined they were planning to take everything from me, even my freedom. The autumn wind off the Atlantic carried a sharp bite as it rattled the old storm windows of my seaside cottage, slipping through the tiny gaps like fingers searching for secrets. I stood at the kitchen sink, hands submerged in warm, soapy water, washing the breakfast dishes while watching the gray waves crash against the rocks far below the cliff. The cottage had stood here for nearly a century, and I called it home for 42 of those years. Before continue, please subscribe my channel, Hazel Stories. Hello, everyone. My name is Eleanor Hayes, and I am 75-year-old. At 75, my body ached in places it never used to. My knees when I climbed the narrow stairs, my shoulders after a day in the garden. But my mind was clear, my heart still fierce. This place wasn't just wood and stone. It was the keeper of every joy and sorrow I'd ever known. George and I had bought it in 1983 for a song because no one else wanted a house that leaned slightly toward the sea with a roof that leaked in nor'easters and plumbing that groaned like an old man. We were young then, 34 and 32, full of dreams and stubborn hope. We patched the roof ourselves, painted the weathered shingles a soft gray blue to match the ocean on stormy days, planted roses that somehow survived the salt wind. Lydia was born 2 years later, and this cottage became the backdrop of her childhood, building sandcastles on the narrow beach at low tide, chasing fireflies in the meadow behind the house, falling asleep to the rhythmic roar of the waves. George taught her to fish from the rocks. I taught her to bake blueberry pies with berries we picked ourselves. Those were golden years, bright and uncomplicated. When George died 10 years ago, sudden, merciless heart attack while splitting wood in the backyard, the cottage wrapped itself around my grief like a quilt. Every corner held him. The crooked bookshelf he'd built from driftwood, the porch swing he'd hung with chains strong enough to hold us both as we watched sunsets, the garden where he'd planted daffodils that still bloomed every spring without fail. I kept living here alone, tending the roses, feeding the birds, knitting scarves for the church bazaar. The silence was heavy some nights, but it was my silence, earned and familiar. Then, in April of this year, Lydia called. Her voice on the phone was thin, strained. "Mom, we're in trouble. Mark lost his job. Downsizing, they said. And the city rent is killing us. We're 2 months behind. Can we come stay with you? Just until we get back on our feet?" I heard the exhaustion in her words, the fear she tried to hide. Of course I said yes. Family is family. I prepared the 2 upstairs guest rooms, aired the quilts, stocked the pantry with Lydia's favorite teas and Tommy's favorite cereals. When they arrived, Lydia hugged me so tightly I felt her ribs through her thin frame. Mark carried the suitcases with forced cheer, and Tommy, my sweet, serious grandson, ran straight into my arms, smelling of car ride and little boy sweat. For the first few months, it felt like a gift. The house came alive again. Tommy's laughter bounced off the walls as he raced toy boats in the tide pools. Lydia and I cooked together, falling into old rhythms, her chopping onions while I stirred the chowder, talking about everything and nothing. Mark spent long hours on his laptop in the sunroom, job hunting, he said. I didn't pry. I was just glad to have voices in the house again. Footsteps on the stairs, someone to share sunsets with on the porch swing. But by late summer, small things began to unsettle me. Lydia started helping more than I asked, reorganizing my desk drawers, sorting through old photo albums to preserve memories, asking casual questions that weren't casual at all. "Mom, have you thought about what would happen to the cottage if something happened to you? It's worth a lot now with the ocean view. Or shouldn't we update your will? You're not getting any younger." She always said it with a smile, a gentle hand on my arm, but the words landed like pebbles in still water, rippling outward. Mark's job search seemed fruitless. He grew edgy, snapping at Tommy over small things, disappearing for hours with vague excuses, meeting a contact in town. I overheard arguments late at night, muffled through the floorboards. Money. Always money. Debts. Bad investments. I told myself it wasn't my business. They were adults. They'd figure it out. October brought colder winds and the first real fracture. It was a Tuesday evening, the sky bruised purple with coming rain. I was in the living room, knitting a scarf the color of sea glass, when Tommy slipped in from the back door, his cheeks red from playing outside. He hesitated in the doorway, twisting the hem of his jacket. "Grandma?" His voice was small. "Can I tell you something?" I set my needles down and patted the sofa beside me. "Come, of course, sweetheart, come sit." He climbed up, knees tucked under him, and looked at me with those serious blue eyes he inherited from George. "Yesterday I heard Mom and Dad talking last night, after I was supposed to be asleep." He swallowed. "Mom said you might not be here for Thanksgiving, that the cottage would be gone soon. Dad said once it's sold, they'll be set for life." His lower lip trembled. "I don't want you to go away, Grandma. This is your house." The words hit me like cold water. I pulled him close, feeling his small heart hammering against my ribs. "Shh, darling, I'm not going anywhere. This is my home. Always will be." But even as I comforted him, dread coiled in my stomach. Children don't invent such things. They repeat what they hear, plain and unfiltered. That night, I lay awake listening to the wind howl around the eaves. Lydia and Mark had invited me for dinner at 7 the next evening. Mark was grilling steaks, a rare treat. But Tommy's words echoed. At 6, I put on my coat and called out, "Heading to the village shop for yarn, ran out mid-row." Lydia appeared in the kitchen doorway, drying her hands on a towel. "Okay, Mom, drive safe." Her smile was bright, but her eyes followed me a moment too long. I drove the winding coastal road to the little store, bought nothing, and parked in the shadows behind the post office. 20 minutes later, I turned back, killing my headlights as I approached the cottage. The house sat dark except for a single light, my bedroom window, upstairs, the room I'd told them I kept private. My heart pounded as I let myself in through the side door, the one with the sticky latch George had never quite fixed. The house was quiet except for faint sounds from above, drawers opening and closing, papers rustling, footsteps crossing the old pine floorboards. I slipped off my shoes and crept up the stairs, avoiding the third step that always creaked. At the landing, I pressed myself against the wall. My bedroom door stood ajar, a sliver of light spilling into the hall. Through the gap, I saw Mark's broad back as he knelt by my dresser, flashlight between his teeth, rifling through the top drawer. Lydia was on her knees beside the bed, pulling out the old cedar chest where I kept important papers, birth certificates, George's death certificate, insurance policies, the deed to the cottage, my will. "It has to be in here," Lydia whispered, frustration sharp in her voice. "She mentioned a safe deposit box once, but this is where she keeps everything important." Mark grunted, moving to the closet. "We need that deed, Lydia. The developer's offer won't stay open forever. $500,000 for this cliffside acre, prime oceanfront. Condos would sell in a heartbeat." Lydia sat back on her heels, clutching a folder of old letters, George's love letters to me, tied with faded ribbon. For a moment, her face softened, almost guilty. "But Mom, what about her? She loves this place." Mark's voice hardened. "She's 75, Lydia. She can't manage alone much longer. Dr. Hargrove said if we document the decline, forgetfulness, confusion, we can petition for guardianship. Then decisions about the property are ours." My breath caught. Guardianship. They wanted to declare me incompetent, strip me of my rights, sell my home out from under me. Ethan already signed the affidavit. He said on our last call she seemed confused, mixing up dates. He barely talks to her anyway. Believed you without question. Lydia's voice cracked. "I hate lying to him. But Mark, what choice do we have? The loans. Those people aren't patient." A floorboard groaned under my foot. They froze. "Did you hear that?" Lydia whispered. Mark stood, moving toward the door. Panic surged through me. I fled down the stairs on silent feet, heart thundering, and slipped into the pantry just as their footsteps reached the landing. "Probably the house settling," Mark muttered. "Old places make noises." They returned to the bedroom. I waited, trembling, until their voices resumed, then escaped out the side door into the cold night. Driving aimlessly along the coast, tears blurred the road. My own daughter, planning to have me declared unfit. For money. The betrayal burned deeper than any winter wind. But beneath the hurt, something else stirred. Resolve. George hadn't raised a quitter, and neither had life. I'd survived raising a child alone after my parents died young. I'd survived burying my husband. I'd survive this too. The next morning, I called my lawyer, Sarah Klein, from the payphone at the harbor, paranoia already taking root. Sarah had handled George's estate with compassion and competence. When I recounted what I'd overheard, her silence was heavy. "Eleanor, this is serious. Financial exploitation of elders is tragically common. We need evidence, recordings, documentation of any unusual activity. I'll pull your current will and deed. Come in tomorrow." I hung up, hands shaking, but purpose steadying them. That afternoon, Lydia brought me tea unasked, her smile too bright. "You seem tired, Mom. Everything okay?" The concern in her eyes felt like salt in a wound. How much was real? How much performance? In town, I bought a small digital voice recorder from the electronics shop, claiming it was for recording my memoirs. At the bank, I requested printed statements for the past year. Seeing the pattern, small withdrawals I hadn't authorized, $50, $100, sometimes $200, always when Lydia had run errands for me, made my stomach turn. The totals added up to thousands. Back home, Tommy found me in the garden, pulling the last of the dead tomato vines. He hugged my legs without a word. I knelt, brushing dirt from my hands. "Want to walk the beach, love?" We wandered the shoreline, collecting sea glass in companionable silence. Finally, he spoke. "Grandma, I heard them again. Mom said the doctor will say you're sick in your mind. Then they can sell the house." His voice broke. "Please don't let them take you away." I held him as the waves roared, his tears soaking my sweater. The human heart is fragile in children. They feel betrayal before they understand it. "I won't go, Tommy, I promise. But you mustn't tell them you told me, all right? It'll be our secret." He nodded solemnly, trusting me completely. That trust became my anchor. That night, I placed the recorder in the living room lamp base, sound activated. Pretending a headache, I went to bed early. Downstairs, their voices drifted up. "The developer's getting impatient, wants a signed intent to sell by December, says the view alone is worth millions in condos." Lydia, "Dr. Hargrove will do the evaluation next Friday. I made a donation to his clinic renovation. He'll find mild cognitive impairment. It's believable. She's 75. Mark, "And the loans? Those collectors called again. We owe $150 now with interest. If we don't pay soon—" Lydia's voice dropped. "They mentioned Tommy last time. Said accidents happen to kids." A pause, heavy with fear. "We have no choice, Mark. Mom can't manage alone forever. Selling is mercy, in a way." Mercy. The word twisted in my chest. Their desperation was real. I heard it, felt it. But so was their willingness to sacrifice me. The next days blurred into a quiet war. My car wouldn't start one morning, wires loosened under the hood. I walked the mile to my neighbor Helen's house through freezing drizzle, legs aching but determination burning. Helen, widowed like me, listened over tea as I poured out the story. Her outrage was immediate. That girl was always headstrong, but this? "Borrow my car, Eleanor, and stay with me if you need. You're not facing this alone." With Helen's car, I saw Dr. Ellis, the independent neurologist Sarah recommended. After hours of tests, memory, reasoning, orientation, he smiled kindly. "Mrs. Hayes, you're sharper than most half your age. No signs of dementia or impairment." His written report felt like armor. Lydia grew watchful. "You've been out a lot, Mom. Everything all right?" The question hung between us, mother and daughter, love and suspicion tangled. Tommy slipped me notes in crayon. "Mom hid your blue pills." Sure enough, my blood pressure medication vanished from the bathroom cabinet. Classic gaslighting. Make the elder doubt their own mind. At dinner, I mentioned it casually. Lydia's eyes flickered. "Maybe you moved them, Mom. I'll help search." Mark stared at his plate. Suspense built like fog rolling in thick and suddenly. One night, scratching at the back door woke me. Peering through the curtains, I saw a shadowy figure retreat into the mist. The next day, a black sedan lingered at the end of my driveway, engine idling. My brother Ethan called from California. "Lydia says you're struggling, Mom, forgetting appointments, leaving the stove on. She wants me to support a guardianship petition for your protection." His voice was uncertain, guilty. I gripped the phone. "Ethan, come see me yourself. Don't sign anything yet." But he'd already signed. The second betrayal cut deep. Both my children arrayed against me. Yet Tommy's fierce hugs kept me grounded. "You're the strongest grandma ever," he whispered one afternoon, presenting me with a sea glass necklace he'd strung himself. Human connection in its purest form, a child's unwavering love. I installed a hidden camera in the kitchen with Helen's help. It captured Lydia finding my scattered papers, staging confusion for later proof. It captured Mark on the phone, voice low and terrified. "We'll have the money by Christmas. Just need a little more time." The confrontation came on a stormy Friday. Dr. Hargrove's sham evaluation was scheduled. Sarah had filed an emergency injunction alleging fraud. Lydia insisted on driving me. The ride was silent, rain lashing the windshield. At the clinic, Hargrove's questions were leading, his pen poised. I answered clearly, calmly. He noted defensiveness, common in early denial. Back home, the recorder caught their celebration. "Hargrove's report will seal it. Guardianship hearing next week." But I was ready. Over coffee the next morning, I laid my cards on the table. I know everything. The plan to declare me incompetent, the developer's offer, the debts to dangerous people, the fake evidence. I played a snippet of their recorded conversation. Lydia went white. "Mom, you're paranoid. This is exactly what we're worried about." "I have an independent medical report stating I'm perfectly competent, bank records of unauthorized withdrawals, video of you planting evidence." My voice stayed steady despite the storm inside. "How could you do this to me, Lydia? After everything?" She broke then, tears streaming. "We're terrified, Mom. The lenders threatened Tommy, said they'd take him if we don't pay. The cottage is our only out." Mark slumped. It wasn't supposed to go this far. But it did, and the price was my life, my home, my dignity. The collectors came that night, 2 rough men in dark coats. I watched from the window as Mark begged for time, Lydia clutching Tommy inside their car. Fear etched their faces raw. Court came swiftly. Sarah presented everything: recordings, one-party consent law legal in Maine, an independent medical report, bank records of unauthorized withdrawals, camera footage. Hargrove crumbled under questioning, admitting the donation influenced his findings. The judge dismissed the petition with prejudice, issued restraining orders, and referred the case to Adult Protective Services and law enforcement for investigation of financial exploitation. Lydia and Mark left the cottage that week, faces hollow. Tommy's goodbye hug nearly undid me. "I love you, Grandma. I'll miss our beach walks." His small voice broke. I held him until Lydia gently pulled him away. The silence after they left was deafening. Victory tasted like ashes. I'd protected my home, my rights, my sanity, but at the cost of my family. Nights were long, grief heavy. Helen stayed over often, her presence a balm. Ethan flew in, contrite, spending days helping repair storm damage, talking late into the nights. Slowly, trust rebuilt. Months later, a letter came forwarded from law enforcement. Lydia's handwriting. Mom, we're cooperating with the FBI on the lending ring. They've placed us in protection. I don't expect forgiveness. I became someone I don't recognize, desperate enough to hurt the person who loved me most. When I think of what I almost did, I'm ashamed. Tommy asks about you every day. He still wears the sea glass necklace. Maybe someday, when this is over, you'll let him visit. I understand if not. I'm sorry doesn't cover it, but it's all I have. I read it many times, tears falling to the page. Forgiveness is complicated. Love doesn't switch off even when trust shatters. I filed the letter away, not ready to answer, but not ready to burn it either. Spring brought renewal. I renovated the guest rooms, painted them soft greens and blues. Tommy visited in June, just him, arranged through protective services. We walked to the beach, collected shells, baked pies. His laughter filled the cottage again, healing something deep inside. At 76 now, I tend my roses, feed the birds, watch sunsets from the porch swing. The cottage stands firm against the wind, as do I. Age has not diminished me. It has distilled me. I know my worth, my rights, my strength. The righteous flourish like palms, bearing fruit even in old age. I am still bearing fruit. Resilience, wisdom, the capacity to love despite pain. The sea keeps its ancient rhythm below the cliff, eternal witness to human frailty and human courage. And I keep living here, in the home I fought for, with the memories I cherish and the future I choose, one day at a time. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more emotional and meaningful life stories like this, please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, Hazel Stories. Your support helps me create more stories that touch the heart. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next story.